My name is Michael McGuire. I'm a lecturer with Glasgow Caledonian University in Glasgow, Scotland, where I specialise in teaching digital construction students. A lot of people don't tend to understand exactly what is digital construction. Think architecture, but technically. So we're looking at how buildings go together. We might be construction project management, quantity surveyors, building surveyors, etc. And I'm teaching them all the digital aspects, so using the software to navigate a model or create a model. And currently with World Skills, I have many hats. I work with the competition organising partner. So we run and create the national cycle. So that would be the national qualifier through to the national final. I'm also the training manager for Squad UK and Team UK. So the competitors that progress from the national final to international competition. And then the one student that progresses from that to go to international competition, the world final, my responsibility is also training them. And I'm also lucky enough to have been elected the chief expert for the skill of number 58, digital construction. So the reason I prefer the term andragogy, it's much more descriptive of what we do. I think a lot of people in industry and education, etc., hear the word pedagogy. But if you think of the peda at the start of that, it's teaching children. Pedagogy and andragogy are totally different because the way children and the way adults learn are totally different. So where if I was a primary teacher or a teacher of a child, I'm much more directed learning. I'm much more me giving information and supporting that child learn as a child learns. If we look at andragogy, it's much more independent. I'm much more just a facilitator of that person's learning. So that is more self-directed and then support using resources or targeted feedback and support that way. So they're both different, but the way competition-based learning definitely works and fits, it does work with pedagogy, but it works much better, I've found, with teaching adults in andragogy. I relate this back to another lecturer at, when I taught in New College, Lanarkshire. She would offer like a little caramel chocolate bar, so a Freddo, which was a Taz bar, and it has a bit of a cult status, this little chocolate bar. And what that lecturer would do was offer in a class for the first person who was finished, maybe for the first student who would be finished without remediation or for the highest mark. And what you could see very, very quickly was students would compete against each other. Friends would compete against each other. Friendly banter, but friends would compete against each other, and then the whole class would be competing against each other in some way or other. I've kind of developed that since 2018. I've been looking at things like since 2018 various incentive levels. So a chocolate bar will hold somebody's attention for a one class period, for example, not a week. Larger incentives, like we speak to Autodesk for sponsorship. We've looked at some other companies for sponsorship as well. So merchandise, a nice backpack that contains a battery in it that you can plug your phone into and things like that. These are nice incentives. And what we find with increasing the incentive a little bit to something that the students really want, they'll put in more time practicing. If you give them good resources, they'll practice using the resources more within reason. But it's actually gone beyond now the incentives. And it's got to the point that beyond the Autodesk merchandise, and yes, a gold medal is lovely, but actually the students are in it for a sense of mastery. They really want to get very good at using the software, the skills, and then ultimately the companies that sponsor the competition. We've had Balfour Beatty, Baker Hicks, Autodesk. They're pretty much using it like a talent pool to then recruit the students from that. So that's better than a chocolate bar, surely. I was introduced to World Skills, I think, in 2012 with mechanical engineering CAD, IT network systems, and so on. And in 2018 or 2017, Autodesk and World Skills UK approached me and asked, could we take some of the competition stuff that we've been developing in the college and turn it into a national sized competition? I think it was around about 2020. Obviously, we had COVID. We pushed the delivery of the national qualifier, or what was the regional competition. In 2020, everything was cancelled. But Autodesk and myself felt we've transitioned to moving to working from home quite successfully. So have the students. And let's be honest, the students typically are more digital natives than a lot of lecturers are. They were quite happy to go and work digitally using Teams or Zoom or whatever. And what we found was we ran a pilot where in 2020, the national qualifier, becoming the national final, was remote delivered and everybody sat it from their home, and it ran really, really successfully. But on the back of that, we then realised that actually what we needed to do was develop learning and teaching resources. So I had a really good programme at New College, Lanarkshire, that was designed by a lot of different past contacts that we had taught. I've been teaching since 2001. So there's a lot of students of mine that are now working in industry, helped us design a great course. The students at the college were doing really well in these competitions because they had the right skill set. So what we started to do in the college was record these lessons and then put them on the learning management system, and then ultimately it moved to YouTube. And all the students all over the UK now, whenever they register, get access to these video resources. That's what made the big leap, was the shared video resources, which is also great as a digital construction lecturer. It's really, really difficult for me to stay up to date with current processes and technologies. So if lecturers can share that resource or pull that resource, and that's really what we've created, is like a community of practice where all the educators and students that want to take part can access these materials and share best practice, tips and tricks, resources, test projects, models, that type of thing. We mentioned andragogy a little bit ago as well. One of the things is that students, if you're an adult, you'll probably find this. You'll have times when you can sit down and work through videos and times when you can't. So if we just give you all the resources and allow you to work through them as you need to, for some people that works really, really well. If you watch a video or two videos and then you practice along with it in the software, so you've picked up the theory, what it's asking you to do, you've watched me do it and demonstrate it in the class or in the video, then you sit with me and you practice that in the computer. If I then quiz you on that immediately after it, if you've done it correct, you get to move on to the next section. You've just had a pat in the back. You've been told it's correct. If it's wrong, let's identify it really quickly. And in that identification, we can also then target feedback and say, right, this is exactly where you got it wrong. Here's another video, or maybe I need to make another video. If 3 or 4 students get the same question wrong, then it's probably my video that's a bit at fault. I can go and remake that video, and then we'll see the students really progress very, very rapidly through that. Obviously, we look at competition-based learning, and it fits anything like project-based learning, gamification. There are lots and lots of these different, what would you say, methodologies that are there. It's the thing for us that the competition just gives that a bit of more enthusiasm. So if we take it from the first stage that we have in the UK, so a student wishing to take part, get access to the materials and so on, they're going to take part in the entry stage. For us, we needed to be able to scale that up. That could be hundreds of students. What our students do in that is they open up a Revit model, they edit that Revit model, they're asked a question in the learning management system. It might be the volume of the rooms, for example. They type it in and it automatically marks it. What me and the team do is we validate that by looking through in case anybody's put a comma instead of a full stop, something like that. So anything that's marked wrong is actually wrong. And if that's 40, 50, 60, 100 people, that's marked automatically, and the top 20 or 30 people from that can then automatically be progressed to the national qualifier. And then in the national qualifier, they're given other videos. We're directing them towards videos. They've already been using the learning management system, so they understand that if they're asked to create a Revit model using floor plans, and then interrogate that model and type in the answers, then we can give them the feedback straight away. I'd say that Andragogy can support everybody. Students don't necessarily need to sign up and take part in the competition. If we look at the resources that are there, they're designed to give you, if you compete, your score. So only your score. So you only need to see your score. So the next thing you can try and do is just simply better your score. If you're doing that, then actually you're increasing your knowledge and skills, your practical ability. I would suggest that the first time I actually attempted this with my students, I looked at all the research that said it would bring extra anxiety if the students knew where they were in the class. So I only told the students, here's what the class average is, and here's your average or your score. But the students themselves actually shared the information, and they very quickly realised what that leaderboard, if we made it a leaderboard, what it would be and who would be in it and where they would be. And by introducing that back to them, it didn't bring any more anxiety than just competing, looking at actually just beating their own score, if that makes sense. But the big one for me is just, again, if students are supported by good learning resources, if the feedback is instant, very, very quick feedback and targeted, telling them where their strengths are in a specific skill area, telling them where their weaknesses are in a specific skill area, that's just andragogy. That's not even competition-based learning. But bringing a little bit of competition element into it, we have to approach it with the view that it can have very negative psychological effects. One of the things I'm really lucky is I'm supported by World Skills UK. As the UK expert, I actually have a fortnightly or monthly catch up with Sabrina, who's a psychologist, to support me, to make sure I'm not getting those negative psychological effects with the pressure that I have on my shoulders. But the same thing that they do with the students. So Isabel, Dan and Paul, when they were in squad, had Dr. Stephanie Tibbert, for example, another psychologist who's there to support them psychologically and make sure that they're benefiting from everything that they can. For me, it's absolutely about keeping it fun, and keeping it informal as much as possible. Students always have the option of opting out. That's a big thing that I would push for it. If you sign up, no matter what, at no matter what stage, even if it's just for a Fredo, which students have the option to opt out at any point. That's really, really important. Something might happen in a student's life that actually they're too busy at this period of time to practice. And it's the practice using the materials that's going to make them better. The driver to make them practice is the competition element. That's the you and me as friends, and you're slightly better than I am. I'm going to beat you the next time, and I'm going to practice. I'll use the materials. But actually what we find is, instead of it breeding anxiety, we tend to find it actually makes the students more collaborative. So students who are friends will recognise where each other's weaknesses are as well and actually help each other. Even though that means that you may beat me in the national final, I've yet to see any student who doesn't go out of their way to help friends or even just others that they've never met before, but they've actually qualified, so they're in the same cohort from different institutions. So it definitely becomes much more like a collaborative training and assessment process, but the ultimate driver is that little competitive element.